Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 9th of May 2023. Let's get straight to the frontline and we'll go straight to the northeast sectors. Not too much to discuss that's relevant to the frontlines in the ISW preamble today. ISW is the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank that does daily reports that I dip into. So Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna, front line here is our first port of call. That looks like this on my map. Kupiansk is here. There's been talk about Vilshana, some territory gained by the Ukrainians yesterday in Vilshana. In fact, I'm going to pop straight to Rebar, the pro-Russian source, that says the Ukrainian assault groups have undertaken another attempt to attack Russian positions on the outskirts of Vilshana. Ukrainian units were dispersed by suppressive artillery fire. It's interesting that this is the entirety of their frontline update, Rebar today. You can see how calm things have become right up and down the front line. If we go to the ISW for their daily report of this section of the front line, there is activity in Vuhledar and Spirna. That is south of Kreminna in the forest further down here. So that is, we have Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna. Vuhledar is there and Spirna is there. We'll come to that in a second. Other than that, Nevska, Makivka, Sinkivka is the sites of activity. According to Ukrainian General Staff, the Russian MD also says Sinkivka and also Kislivka and Novomlinsk. These are sites of Russians repelling Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group. So what we have started seeing over the last week is Russian MOD reports. This is a difference in activity here. Definitely marked difference, in my opinion. We are starting to see Russian MOD claims every day of Ukrainian reconnaissance and sabotage groups being repelled. Now, we did hear about them before throughout the offensive period of the Russians. Just here and then, there would be a Ukrainian reconnaissance group was repelled here, and maybe a few days later, one here. But every day, we're getting the Ukrainians having reconnaissance activities around, up and down the entire front line, really. So that's Sinkivka up here, there near Kupiansk, and then you have Klishchivka there. We've got activity in Makivka, Nevska, so on and so forth. But really, not too much else to report. It does say geolocated footage published on May the 7th shows an unspecified element of Russian 98th Guards Airborne as a paratroopers conducting a drone strike against Ukrainian positions south of Torska. So Torska is there, south of Torska. Let's see where the Ukrainians are and see if this indicates anything particularly unusual. So here we have the footage. There's a Lancet drone hitting a Ukrainian tank in the village of Torska. So I presume that's going to be right behind the lines there, and it's going to be nothing particularly important in changing our mapping here. So the Ukrainians behind their lines are doing what you'd expect them to do, which is hanging out behind their lines. So that geolocated footage, while it's interesting and it's confirmatory, so it confirms that Ukrainians control the area, which I think they do. It doesn't tell us too much else. Nonetheless, we continue. We go on further down south already to Bakhmut, and there is a fair bit of activity happening in Bakhmut, but even there, not a huge amount, considering actually the Ukrainians only control a tiny amount of the town. In fact, when you have claims of 100 meters, 130 meters, was it today that Prigozhin said that the Ukrainians took at the expense, the Russians took at the expense of, I don't know, 90 soldiers or something, then that is a large percentage of what is left of the Ukrainian controlled territory, because they just don't have much left. Anyway, that's the war mapper map. That is from yesterday, so last night. Russia have continued to advance in the north towards the remaining Ukrainian stronghold in the high-density residential area in the west. A reporter from Ukraine has a video on activity that took place yesterday. Before we go to the centre, though, let's go to No Reports, who says yesterday, commander from the terror unit, Abdullah, reported on a local offensive operation from his unit near Bakhmut. Most analysts agree it's most likely near Sako Ivanseti, black outline, where the Ukrainian forces managed to return 1 kilometre of land, not yet confirmed visually. I would disagree. I think it is confirmed visually, because we have had that trench being overrun by Ukrainians, and that was geolocated yesterday by myself. Well, not geolocated by me. I put it on my map. It's geolocated by someone else. But I think you have seen some gains for the Ukrainians in that area, which is why mappers like the pro-Russian mapper Suryak Maps has this area now not under Russian control. I've still kept it grey zone, but you get the idea. Interesting that neither Deep State Map did no mapping updates yesterday, and Suryak Maps has no mapping updates, just a retweeted thread about defenses, which I'm actually going to go through in my extra video. I don't know whether there's operational security going on so that Deep State Map is not being as frequent with mapping updates and maybe not including changes in certain areas. It wouldn't surprise me if that is the case. The Ukrainians are pretty tight on operational security measures. Okay, so going now back to no reports and into Bakhmut, Bakhmut, situation virtually unchanged. Prigozhin claims 130 meters territorial gain. This could be around the medical college. Ukrainian troops withdrew from a high-rise building just north of it. Ukrainian troops maintained partial control of the O0506 and the T0504 to Ivanivska. So this is partial control of the northern road coming through Kremova, which is here, just coming in there. And then the southern road coming through Ivanivska there to the south. This southern one has, there's more ability to use that. The Russians are very much closer to the O0506 highway coming in to the north. But it's interesting that, yeah, no real mapping changes as according to any sources I have found. Just a claim from Prigozhin that they have made some territorial gains. So now 130 meter territorial gain, perhaps. And there was incendiary munitions used again last night. So I think that's 3 nights in a row that has been used. Rybar, the pro-Russian source, says in the western districts of Bakhmut, Russian forces are engaged in severe battles for Bubka College of Olympic Reserve. To the south, Wagner PMC's assault groups are advancing along Tulbahina Street and Levchenko Street, pushing the enemy out of the city meter by meter. But I don't know that that's actually reflected in any other claims that I have seen. The fighting, as mentioned by reporting from Ukraine, is fighting in this northern area as the Russians are trying to gain purchase right to north and circle around here, as well as through the centre too. Right, let's go to the ISW to see what they have to say. Russian forces have made marginal advances within Bakhmut as of May the 8th, so yesterday, amid reports of intensified Wagner Group forces' offensive operations. Now, remember, it's Victory Day parade, Victory Day today, on May the 9th, so the Russians would be wanting to have complete control over Bakhmut by the end of today, I guess, really ideally before today, so they could celebrate it today. That hasn't happened. It doesn't look like it will happen. There are some rumors that, and reporting from Ukraine again talk about this, that there could be a surprise midnight attack tonight of accumulated Ukrainian troops north and south of Bakhmut in some kind of counter attack to encircle. There were claims that they've pummeled with HIMARS, used HIMARS in a much more frontline offensive manner over the last 24 hours or so. It could be that the Ukrainians are getting ready for a counterattack to encircle the Russian troops. There's a number of Russian troops that could be caught in that movement. If that was to happen, it would be, I think, a pretty sensible move. But it could also be psyops. There have been Russian claims that the Ukrainians are going to do this, that they are mounting their reserves, that this is going to happen any day, and it hasn't happened. And that could be to keep the Russians on their toes or to fix Russian troops there. So they send more troops into Bakhmut so that those troops aren't elsewhere, and that allows the Ukrainians to counterattack elsewhere. So all sorts of options open, just unsure as to what will happen. Then it's geolocated footage published on May the 7th indicates that Russian forces likely made gains in western Bakhmut. And here it is. The Ukrainian troops lay down covering fire for a squad to withdraw from the south end of Levanovsky Street, and that's what Rybar were talking about, and the south end of number 95 and Vodka restaurant. Wagner are reportedly on the second and third floors of the same building. So intense fighting, very close ranks there. They are fighting each other in the buildings, extricating themselves from that building, the Ukrainians. Well, where is that? It could be that they're pulling out from here, and we'll zoom in. Yeah, well, I would agree with that, because that's well, interesting that is the edge of deep state maps area. So you can imagine them pulling back from there. And there's that Vodka restaurant there, the Asian restaurant. Syriac Maps has had that under Russian control for some time, so for a good couple of days. So there is a difference there, and that footage could suggest that Deep State Maps is more correct in the assessment of control there than Syriac. So that is interesting bit of geolocation. Russian mill bloggers claimed 2 days ago that Russian forces increased assaults on Ukrainian positions near Bodanivka. That's north, Chasiv Yar, that's to the west, and Orikovo-Vasilivka, again north of Bakhmut, and conducted assaults near Bodanivka, Predcheny, and Ivanivska. So these places, just to give you an idea of where these are, you've got Bodanivka is there. You've got Chasiv Yar, it's obviously the settlement behind Bakhmut, where they would have to go on to take, the Russians would have to try and take that after Bakhmut, and arguably that's even more difficult to take given the physical geography. It's sitting on higher ground. There are forests, swamps, there's sort of water in the area, so it's potentially more difficult for them to take. And then you've got Ivanivska there, Predcheny over there. These are sort of places that are being mentioned. So Ukrainian spokesperson Cherevati reported yesterday that Russian forces conducted 29 assaults in the Bakhmut direction. There's increased artillery activity, indicating that Russian forces in the area do not suffer from significant ammunition shortages, despite Prigozhin's claims. He stated that Russian forces continue to conduct attritional ground attacks as a main tactic in the Bakhmut area. Ukrainian commander of the 127th Territorial Defense Brigade reported on 2 days ago that additional Wagner personnel arrived and are operating in the city, leading to an increased intensity of assaults. He also stated that Ukrainians have not observed any indications that Wagner intends to leave the city, and that intensified shelling likely indicates that Wagner has received more ammunition. And then the general staff talk about operations near Kromove, Ivanivska, Chasiv Yar, Stopochki. So some of the places I already mentioned, Stopochki's there. There's activity all around, but not too much territorial exchange. And so we can safely come on down to Adivka and see if there's been any activity there, given that it's been somewhat quiet in Bakhmut, relatively speaking. And to be honest, not a lot has changed, or in some senses, nothing has changed. There are repelled attacks in Pervomaisky and a few of the normal sort of places. Pervomaisky, Adivka itself. Marinka is mentioned, but only sort of in passing, no discrete information about Marinka. And indeed, reporting no confirmed ground attacks in Western Donetsk Oblast. The Russian forces did not report anything. Although they did say that they repelled a Ukrainian reconnaissance and force operation in an unspecified location in Western Donetsk Oblast. So that is to say, okay, really no change in Adivka, no mapping changes there that I've heard, no changes to Marinka, and no information at all about Vuhledar. There is an unspecified repelled Ukrainian attack somewhere in the general area. As we sort of zoom out and look a little bit towards Zaporizhia, we have Orikhiv here just to give you a sense of place. Holayopole there, Velika Novosilka, and then Vuhledar over towards the east. ISW says that Russian forces targeted Ukrainian positions in Zaporizhia direction. Geolocated footage published 2 days ago shows that Russian forces striking Ukrainian positions near Shebaki in Zaporizhia Oblast. There was some activity around Shebaki maybe a month ago now, if I remember correctly. Here is a footage showing... Jeez, what? No, that wasn't supposed to happen. That was really loud in my ears. Why would you need to put that music on anyway? Sorry, gonna rant. So there's aerial bombardments and this has been geolocated to northeast of Shebaki. That is, let's find it. And the Ukrainians are, yeah, that's a long way behind the line. So I don't think that tells us anything mapping wise. There's Shebaki there. I don't know if you remember, there were these claims a month, maybe 2 months ago. Goodness me, I don't know. Time flies. Of these places just south of Orikhiv being taken. You know, Mali, Shebaki, Novandrivka, Novandilivka. The Russians claimed that they'd done a really good job there, and then I think it was a bit overblown, and it turns out they hadn't really got control. It's possibly sort of reconnaissance activities as opposed to any kind of attack. But anyway, they are now under Ukrainian control quite firmly, and the Russians are obviously trying to pepper them with artillery. Russian forces, and indeed there's routine fire in Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast between the two sides. Russian forces continue defensive operations in Kherson Oblast. Ukrainian Kherson Oblast administrator Sehi Khan stated that Russian forces are massively mining the east or left bank of the Dnipro River in Kherson Oblast. Kherson Oblast occupation head Saldo has published footage yesterday purportedly showing him visiting fortifications in occupied Kherson. Saldo claimed that fortifications are well equipped and that the Russian forces stationed there will receive an additional supply of anti-drone guns. Interesting. So that is pretty much it as far as a frontline update goes. A really very quiet day, all things considered. Wasn't a quiet evening. There were a whole load of missiles sent over, cruise missiles sent over by the Russians. 23 out of 25 of them were taken down by the air defenses. That's a really good interception rate by the Ukrainians. I'll be very interested to see what happens today, given it's victory day, and whether either side has something up their sleeves to try and get some kind of PR win as well as a tactical or operational win on the battlefield. We shall see. Anyway, thank you for your support. Really appreciate all of your help. I will be back later with a update extra video. But in the meantime, take care. Speak soon.